Okay, let's watch what we say. Just kidding. Okay, so Purim, similar to Hanukkah, is a minor holiday. Major holidays are prescribed in the Torah. Minor holidays are not. They're post, right? Usually they came about after. But they're marked by special observances. But at the same time, because they're not major, you're permitted to work, right? There's no prohibition of working. It's not like Shabbat. And chief among these minor holidays are Hanukkah and Purim. They both commemorate great deliverances of the Jewish people. So, the festival of Purim is based on the story of the book of Esther. While scholars have had difficulty in identifying the time and the characters of the story, there is no doubt that Jewish tradition and Jewish people have accepted the event as authentic, and the celebration of Purim is based on firm foundation. Unlike Hanukkah, which is post-biblical and is not even mentioned in the Mishnah, Purim is based on a book of the Bible. A tractate of the Mishnah and Talmud are devoted to Purim. So, okay. This is from my Guide to Jewish Religious Practice. It says, Purim attained great popularity because it reflected the perennial problem of the Jewish people, animosity against the Jews. Haman's accusation, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the peoples, has been repeated in every age. So those of you who are new to the Purim holiday, do you know who Haman was? He was the guy who wanted to kill all the Jews. There's always one, right? In this story, it's Haman or Haman. The Hebrew is Haman. I will call him Haman. The celebration of Purim serves to strengthen our people, enabling them to face such accusations with dignity and courage, and inspiring them with the hope of final victory over their enemies. The Sabbath or Shabbat preceding Purim is called Shabbat Zachor. So that is, in fact, what it says on my Jewish calendar. On March 4th, it is Shabbat Zachor, which is the Shabbat of remembrance. We'll read Titzaveh is the Torah portion, but that's neither here nor there a little bit. It is also one of the 4 parashiot preceding Pesach. So a digression a little bit. Leading up to Passover, there are designated readings that we like to do, 4 parshayot, four readings or parshas, to kind of get us ready for the holiday of Passover. So in the 6 weeks preceding Pesach, during the months of Adar and Nisan, there are 4 special Shabbatot. They have different names, but one of those is also this Shabbat Zachor, which, because of the timing of Purim and Passover, Purim falls within that 6-week time frame. All right, am I explaining this okay? So the Shabbat preceding Purim, Shabbat Zachor, 2 Torah scrolls are used. In the first, the portion of the week is read, and in the second, we read particular verses from Deuteronomy chapter 25, which tells of the battle of Amalek. So this portion begins with the word Zachor, hence we call it Shabbat Zachor. The Haftorah is from the first book of Samuel, chapter 15, which also tells of the battle with the Amalekites. So this material is associated with Purim because of a tradition that Haman, was a descendant of the Amalekites, since he was called an Agagite. And Agag was king of the Amalekites in the time of Samuel. Sorry, I messed up their names, but that's historically the connections, all right? Okay, so the Amaleks and Haman had in common the desire to annihilate the Jewish people, and both were frustrated basically in that design. So neither one was able to succeed in that. All right, so the day before Purim, which is the 13th of Adar, is a fast day. If Purim is on a Sunday, the fast day is observed on the preceding Thursday. So there are 4 statutory public fast days that the rabbis have declared. They are observed in memory of tragic events connected with the destruction of Jerusalem and the loss of the Jewish state. The fast of Esther is a statutory public fast day, similar in nature, but it is connected with a different calamity that threatened the existence of the Jewish people. The precedent for this fast is found in the book of Esther itself. When Mordecai informed Esther of Haman's plan, she asked him to proclaim a 3-day fast. It is in memory of this that we fast on the day before Purim. Noting that the fast proclaimed by Esther was not on the 13th of Adar, some authorities offer a different explanation. When the children of Israel gathered together on the 13th of Adar to defend themselves against their enemies, they were in a state of war, and preparations for war always include a public fast. A modern commentator suggests that the Jews fasted on the 13th of Adar because they were so occupied with defending themselves that they had no opportunity to eat. Since the fast of the 13th of Adar is not explicitly mentioned in the Bible, the rabbis were lenient about its observance. The primary observance connected with Purim is the reading of the book of Esther, of course. So the Megillat Esther, which is the book of Esther. A Megillah is a scroll. So this book happens to get rolled up in a small scroll. It is read twice, in the evening after the Amidah of Ma'ariv service and before Aleinu, and in the morning after the Torah reading. So this year we will read it the evening of March 6th and the morning of March 7th. It is chanted according to a special cantillation used only in the reading of the book of Esther. So, we know we have Torah cantillation, we have Haftorah cantillation, we now have the Megillat Esther, the book of Esther cantillation. We have a different cantillation modified during Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And we have a different cantillation, I believe, for Lamentations, the book of Lamentations. That one I'm not particularly familiar with. Anyway, let's see. Before the reading, the scroll is unrolled. This is interesting. I don't know if I've seen this happen. So I know we have a Megillat Esther at my shul. It's beautiful. It's this little Torah scroll. But this says the scroll is unrolled and folded to look like a letter of dispatch, thus further recalling the story of the great deliverance. This was suggested by Maimonides. The reading is preceded by 3 benedictions and followed by 1. And this is, so I'm going to share my screen. Give me 1 second.
How do you say that king's name again?
Achashverosh.
Achashverosh, okay.
Some people say Achashverosh, depending on where you put the emphasis. But that's how I was taught to say it. If someone else was taught a different pronunciation, tell us. But okay, so this is from the Rabbinical Assembly. It is a beautiful PowerPoint that they put together on the book of Esther. And the blessings before we read, this one is very simple. It looks like and starts the same as virtually every other blessing, right? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddishanu b'mitzvotav. So this is, I'm here observing, this is because you told me to observe something. And here's what it is that I'm observing. V'tzivanu al mikra Megillah, regarding the public reading of the Megillah, or the out loud reading, Mikra Megillah, which would be the public recitation of the Megillah. Okay? The next one, very simple. We know this. This is the same bracha you say on Hanukkah, but one of them. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa nisim la'avotenu bayamim hahim bazman hazeh. Right? So thank you, we're thanking him because there was this miracle that saved us and brought us to now. So that's, I started out saying that these two minor holidays have certain things in common. Here we have the same bracha. Geraldine, if you want me to wait before I switch screens, that's fine. You okay? All right. And then this is just the Shechechianu because we're thanking for getting here for, we only do it once a year. So Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Okay? So, and the book of Esther, I believe, is 5 chapters. So let me just double check here. Chapter 2. Chapter 3, chapter 4. Oh, maybe I'm wrong. Chapter 5, chapter 6. Okay, I'm wrong. Oh, I miscalculated. It's a lot longer than I thought. At any rate, okay. I'm gonna keep going in my, okay, so the Megillah must be read standing and from the scroll, not by heart. This is not unlike what I was taught for my Haftorah, that I was not to memorize it. I was to be reading it from the words, from the written pages I was given, not to be memorized. Some congregations apparently chant certain verses when they are read from the Megillah. They are the verses of redemption that are said aloud together. Certain phrases, apparently the reader raises his voice, especially at the turning point in the story. Interestingly, it says the verses enumerating the 10 sons of Haman are said in one breath to signify that they died together. Another reason has also been suggested: we should avoid the appearance of gloating over their faith, even though it was deserved. So, that's not unlike what we do on Pesach when we pour off, right, little bits of wine, because we shouldn't rejoice in the death of those others. So we want to diminish our joy. So here we don't want to appear to be gloating at the death of his family. It was a widespread Purim custom for the listeners of the Megillah reading to make noise, usually with special noisemakers called groggers, whenever Haman's name is mentioned. So for those of you who have not been to synagogue during Purim, certainly at my synagogue, the young children are brought in for the reading of the Megillah. They, if they're in their Hebrew school classes or if they're somewhere in the building, they are brought in. They are given free rein to make as much noise as they can and want to. Some of us, particularly those of us who might have a little ringing in the ear or other things, I hate that part. I hate how loud it gets, but that's just my personal problem, obviously. But this is interesting. I never knew where this came from. My whole life, this is what they did. We used to get people who were fancier or had things handed down, had these beautiful wooden groggers that they would use. For the Hebrew school kids, we were always given the penny metal ones that they bought 100 in the bag or something. It's no big deal. And they make quite a lot of noise. I think people also in my shul, I think somebody brought like a cowbell, and somebody had they're like not a tambourine, but things that they shook that had many bells chiming at once.
Like
I don't know.
cymbals or
Yeah,
bells. Yeah.
bells on a round thing. I don't know what to
Yeah.
call that, but yeah. Here it says that this noise making is an outgrowth of a custom once prevalent in France and the Provence, where the children wrote the name on smooth stones and struck them together whenever Haman's name was mentioned, so as to rub it off, suggested by the verse that the name of the wicked shall rot. In some places, this practice is discouraged because it makes it difficult for worshipers to hear the reader, but I've never been to a shul where they discouraged it. It's always loud and raucous. So the Megillah should be read in the synagogue in the presence of a minyan. However, if a minyan's not available, you can in fact read it just for one. Okay, have you heard of Shushan Purim? Okay, yes. So this says, quote, because the Jews that were in Shushan assembled together on the 13th day thereof, and on the 14th thereof, and on the 15th day of the same, they rested and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore do the Jews of the villages that dwell in the unwalled towns make the 14th day of the month of Adar a day of gladness and feasting. This is from the book of Esther. So the book of Esther takes place in the town of Shushan, or a town near is Shushan, okay? From these verses, the sages derive the view that Purim was celebrated on the 15th of Adar, as in Shushan, in cities that had been walled since the days of Joshua. In the towns of the Ashkenazic diaspora, this is academic because there are no cities that ancient, and so they're too new. In Jerusalem, however, Purim is observed on the 15th of Adar. There are also cities which are in a doubtful category, such as Jaffa, Safed, and Akko, Tiberias. In these, the Megillah is read on both the 14th and the 15th of Adar. So that's essentially what happens in the diaspora. We're in the diaspora, right? So we read it twice, on the 14th and the 15th, or the eve of the 14th and so forth. Okay, so this is, okay. The services on Purim are the same as on other weekdays, except for certain variations. So Al Hanisim is added before Va'al Kulam in the Amidah. So this same thing is added for Hanukkah, and it's added for Purim. It's just some words. And of course, there's an addition to Birkat Hamazon. The Torah is read in the morning with 3 people having aliyot. The reading is from Exodus chapter 17. So do you guys know what Hallel is, or do you know the phrase Hallel? So Hallel is an addition to our service. It'll come up when we start preparing for Pesach. Well, it might come up if I if I get to it. But so Hallel is, hold on, what page am I supposed to be on? I think I'm on the wrong page. Oh, here, let me change my screen. Okay, so Hallel are certain Psalms, designating Psalms 113 to 118. The Psalms are essentially expressions of thanksgiving and joy for divine redemption. It's recited in a couple of forms. You have the full Hallel, consisting of Psalms, all of them, 113 to 18. It's chanted in synagogue on Sukkot, Hanukkah, the first day of Passover, Shavuot. Hold on, let's see. I can't read what this is saying. Where are we? Sukkot, Hanukkah, first day of Shavuot. And it says in many synagogues on Israel Independence Day. It's also recited during Passover, during the Seder. We have a section of the Haggadah called Hallel. And it's because of the Exodus from Egypt, right? So there's also a half Hallel, but most importantly, so it says Hallel is recited on all major biblical festivals, with the exception of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, right? Because the solemnity of those occasions do not, it's not suitable to have these psalms of joy. Similar consideration caused these psalms to be omitted in a house of mourning on the new moon, so Rosh Chodesh and Hanukkah. It is not recited on Purim. This is where I wanted to go. So it's not recited on Purim because the scroll of Esther is considered to be the festival's Hallel, the substitution for the Hallel itself. Anyway, okay, so that was the important, whoops, how do I stop my share? I have to come back to you. I'm sorry, here we go. I wanted you to understand that. So Purim customs. This is a little bit interesting. So there is a difference of opinion regarding weddings on Purim. I can't imagine. Some authorities oppose them on the principle that we do not mix one joyous occasion with another. Others permit them. The weight of opinion is with permitting them. I can't say that I have ever heard of someone getting married on Purim, but anything's possible, I guess. Talk about crazy celebration. So at my shul, the clergy dress up on Purim. Does anyone else? Yeah, they dress crazy sometimes.
Right.
Crazy.
Oh, the shul goes crazy.
It's a Jewish, like Jewish Halloween.
Exactly. Right. So
another fun celebration on Purim is a bar bat mitzvah. And we've been to a few bat mitzvahs on Purim, and the bat mitzvah reads the scroll of Esther.
The scroll of Esther, exactly. Yes. I
And
imagine
everyone comes to the occasion dressed in costume.
Yeah.
It's fun. Very festive.
Yeah, I imagine it's the mood is so much crazier than a Shabbat morning, right? Also, it's very common, excuse me, it's allowed that you drink too much. So in Hasidic tradition, very Orthodox places, they will have singing and dancing out in the street, and the men will just imbibe and imbibe and imbibe, and it gets too crazy. So
And supposedly you can gamble. So many synagogues will do gambling Las Vegas night fundraisers that night, knowing that that's the only time of the year that a rabbi would say go ahead.
Aren't they supposed to get so drunk you can't tell the difference between Haman and Mordecai?
Yeah,
exactly. Right. That's right. Edith, I'm sorry to tell you all, you look like, what are they talking about? What is this craziness? This is true.
No, I've been around a while. I don't know how many times. It seems it's been a long time since I went to that Purim service in the morning, because it does get rowdy. But we're in a small synagogue, so it doesn't. I mean, and we're in the woods. We don't have anybody dancing in the street.
Well, so sometimes. So at my shul, the morning service tends to be less raucous than the evening service, because people who go to work, and yeah. So if you want the quieter version, you come in the morning, not the night before. The night before is the crazy. One of the cantors who was at my shul for many years. He's no longer there. He's moved to a different shul. He actually bought 2 suits. He bought a white suit and a black suit. He took it to a tailor and he had them cut in half and sewn together. And he wore this half black, half white suit on Purim. No joke. One leg was black, one leg was white. And then he had the opposite on top. Half of the jacket was black over the white and half was white over the black. This was his thing. My very distinguished rabbi, the senior rabbi, I saw him in some crazy getups and I was shocked that he was willing to do it, but he's like, hey, it's Purim.
Carolyn's leaving.
Sorry.
Okay.
I
Connie's
have to leave. I have another meeting. I'm so sorry.
It's
But I'll
okay.
see
Thank
you all
for
in 2
coming.
weeks and have a good job.
Yeah, 2 weeks.
But Connie,
Yeah, yeah.
but you look good leaving, okay?
You think so? Well,
Love
thank
your
you all for
sweater.
giving me the opportunity to glamorize.
Okay. Bye.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. You know, and one of our temples we belonged to, they would write Haman's name on the sole of their shoe, and Friday, and on the eve of the reading with everybody stamping their feet was part of it. But Rabbi also had a flashlight that did red and green, and that's how he'd stop everybody so they could read on.
So on my shul, they would have a stoplight that they put on the bima, and they would switch it from stop to go when to quiet people down, because they would just keep being loud, especially the little ones. They didn't know when to stop, so that you couldn't get through the reading if they wouldn't be quiet.
Right.
So they had a stop sign. Okay. So Purim customs. Let's see, this keeps going on. Oh, here. So the feasting and gladness are expressed by the Seudat Purim, so a special festive meal held in the afternoon before sundown. In order to heighten the joy at this meal, the rabbis even allowed an unusual amount of levity. Well known is the statement in the Talmud, a person should be exhilarated with drink on Purim, that he does not know the difference between cursed be Haman and blessed be Mordecai. So there's a Talmudic section written on this. So the authorities tried hard to lessen the exuberance of this command. Since they couldn't condone intoxication, they suggested that the passage means one may drink more than he does usually. And it was suggested that the numerical value of cursed by Haman, the phrase cursed by Haman and blessed by Mordecai, are the same. So to be unable to discover this does not require a very high degree of intoxication because they're the same. Nevertheless, let's see. So the permissiveness in regard to imbibing on Purim was explained on the ground of imbibing was very much involved in the story of Purim. Vashti fell from grace when the heart of the king was merry with wine, which resulted in Esther becoming the queen. When Esther became queen, there was a similar banquet. Haman's downfall started with the drinking of wine. It was customary in Eastern Europe for youngsters at this festival meal to be disguised in costumes and to sing humorous Purim songs or render humorous dramatic recitations, usually of their own composition. Each country and each generation, dating back to Talmudic times, had its own form of merrymaking. So we call these Purim spiels. Have you heard the phrase, a Purim spiel? So
Yeah.
a lot of synagogues used to do these. These were really popular in the 60s and 70s, I think.
Yeah.
My sisterhood, I've seen the pictures. They used to write a Purim spiel and they would act it out. So, and they would have lots of fun. They would literally have, I think, a committee or something where they'd write a play or a silly something that was to be performed.
That's
I don't
what happens at our synagogue too. And plus they have the silly symphony, because they asked me if I would play for it. I'm like, I'm not ready for that. Okay.
Well, my
Okay.
granddaughter was in a spiel, the class right before Bar and Bat Mitzvah, and her Hebrew name is Esther, so she was Esther, and it was all these songs were parodies, but her song was My Guy Mordecai was her solo that she sang. And it was, oh, I know, it was like Motown Shushan or something like that was the title of it. And it was really adorable, although the parents thought the kids were never going to do it right, but they did. It was just fine. We went to see them.
Yeah, this theme this year is on the Beatles.
Ah, fun. Lots of good tunes there.
Yeah, our cantor and rabbi were very creative, and they would write a Purim spiel every year, and lots of people would participate in it and look forward to it because it was really very funny. And here in Florida, at the country club that I lived in previous years, it appears that they're not having it this year, or I would have already seen notice of it, but they did put on Purim spiels telling the story of Esther, or the story of Purim in, a funny way. And they would dress up in costume and tell jokes and so it is considered, a holiday of merriment.
Well, and I think it's a way for them to, in the Hebrew schools, get the kids more engaged.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So it says here, in Israel, and I don't know if this is true today. Again, this book was written, this is a book from the 70s, but this says in Israel, Purim, like Hanukkah, has experienced a great revival with emphasis on the national theme. One specific innovation is the Ad Layada. The name is based on the Talmudic statement mentioned. Let's see. It is an elaborate, well-organized parade with floats, bands, marchers, costumes, and dancing in the streets and the squares of the city. This one I'm more familiar with, the practice of Mishloach Manot. You hear about Mishloach Manot. So
yeah, that's a big fundraiser.
Yeah, we have a big fundraiser too.
Yes. So another phrase of this is Shalach Manas, which I think is the Yiddish version of Mishloach Manot. Shalach Manas. So we exchange gifts of food and pastries. The custom of giving gifts to the poor on Purim has become a casualty of the modern system of organized charity, according to the author of this book back in the 70s. So in ages past, it was ordained that on Purim, people were to be extra generous, giving to all who asked without question. It is still customary in many congregations to put collection plates on a table in the vestibule of the synagogue. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't know. The contributions are called Machatzi Hashekel money, in memory of the half shekel that was collected in ancient days around Purim time for the upkeep of the temple in Jerusalem. I think that's fallen by the wayside, and instead we do this Mishloach Manot, and we do this one other thing where you can, I have to think of what it's called. So the only special food for Purim are hamantashen, the three-cornered pastries filled with poppy seeds, or these days, they're filled with everything but poppy seeds, right? They're filled with chocolate, they're filled with dried fruit, they're filled with jelly. But the original name was muntashen, and mun is the Yiddish word for poppy seed. And when I was growing up, we always got either prune or mun poppy seed. That's all they made. And we thought that was all that was legit. Prune filled, poppy seed filled. So in Hebrew, the word for hamantashen is aznei Haman, which is the eyes of Haman, aznei, because aznayim are eyes. But there was another name that we called it that referred to the three corners. Hakova Shali, Shalosh Pinot. Shalosh Pinot are three corners. Hakova Shali, Shalosh Pinot, Shalosh Pinot. So there's a song about my hat, it has three corners. The Hebrew version is Hakova Shali, Shalosh Pinot. Yeah. The many community and family forms of Jewish history are a unique development. Okay. Private holidays instituted to commemorate great deliverances experienced by individual communities or families. I think he's just summarizing here. So the festival of Purim offers Jews a powerful lesson, teaching them not to despair even when dangers are most threatening and persecution most cruel. Its festivities cheered the Jew in his darkest moments and assured him that deliverance was at hand. No wonder that the sages took literally the book of Esther's promise that these days of Purim shall not despair from among the Jews, nor the memory of them perish from their descendants, and therefore said, all the festivals will cease, but the days of Purim will not cease. All right, so that's the chapter on Purim in my book. Unmute and tell me if you have questions.
I don't have questions, but I pulled this because I remember it was some of the interesting things you didn't know about Purim. One was that Esther was a vegetarian, or at least a flexitarian. I don't know what a flexitarian is, but anyway.
I'm not sure.
You're supposed to have a go-between to deliver your mishloach manot.
Mishloach manot, okay.
Okay. That it says that in the book of Esther that stipulates you should send gifts to one another, not just give gifts, you should send it. The Hamatashin might have been designed to symbolize Haman's hat or his ears or pockets, or something like a little more womanly. Some say the cookies represent his ears, cutting off a criminal's ears before his execution. Another thing is the three corners represent the three patriarchs whose power weakened Haman and gave strength to Esther to save the Jews. Yet another theory, because the German word Tasch, T-A-S-C-H-E, means pouch or pocket. The cookies could signify Haman's pockets and the money he offered the king for permission to kill the Jews. And finally, in recent years, some feminists have suggested the cookies, which after all, are not dissimilar to appearance to female reproductive parts, were meant to be fertility symbols. Okay. All right.
That's one I never heard before.
All right. So yeah, that was kind of
very interesting. Okay. Well, all right then. So in Lev Shalem, I just want to mention, so I looked up in the index what it has on Purim, and it just has a page back toward the end at 431, that this prayer is added toward the end of the Amidah. And so they have it separately here. And I believe it's the same one that's added. I mentioned it earlier. Very similar to the one mentioned on Hanukkah. So this is in the time of Mordechai and Esther. I'm reading from Siddur Lev Shalem. In the time of Mordechai and Esther, in the Persian capital of Shushan, the evil Haman rose up and plotted to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate the entire Jewish people, young and old, women and infants. This was to be done in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month of Adar, and all of their goods were to be plundered as well. But you, in your great mercy, foiled this plot, upset his plan, visited upon him what he deserved, and he and his sons were hanged on the gallows. So there's a prayer that we add commemorating that, and it's very specific. Okay. So here's interesting. Well, they say hanged on the gallows. The modern scholars believe, and I actually read this in the Rabbinical Assembly's version, the modern scholars believe that it was really that he was impaled on a stake, and the public display of his body was a sign of disgrace. So literally he was impaled through this giant stake and they left him there.
That's some Games of Thrones stuff, isn't it?
That's so barbaric. It's exactly, but times were different. So, and it wasn't us who did it. It was the King Ahasuerus's guys who did it, right? It wasn't the Jews who really impaled him. So I take solace in that.
I don't know if you can take solace because we're studying the book of oh shoot, who is it? Joshua. We're studying the book of Joshua in our Torah tabloids class. And that was discussed yesterday. What was the point of impaling? Because at the end of some of those wars that Joshua won, that's what he did.
You're right. I mean, it was a brutal time, truly.
Yeah, and that's what Rabbi has to keep explaining because people keep saying, what was the point of doing that? Why wipe out everybody? Why do this? That's what happened back during this biblical time. It's very bloody.
Yeah. And they felt they were fighting for their survival. It was all about what land they had and how they could be safe within that land. And so
pleasing God.
Yeah, well,
some of this was by instruction. It's very difficult to think.
It is. It really is. You know, when I think to myself, I can't watch football because they're crashing into each other and they're wearing protection and stuff. But so this stuff really throws me. The barbarism is just, it's so dreadful. So.
Yeah. I guess I used to just skirt over it, but now that we study it and go word for word, it's like, ooh, it's a different.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and it's not dissimilar to the Akedah, the sacrifice of Isaac, and all of the new commentary that's been written. You know, growing up as a child, the thought of a father saying, yeah, okay, I'll sacrifice him. It's like, what? You can't say yes to that. So, you know, the new Machzor with the new commentary actually helped me a lot understand, to see that from a different perspective, or put it in a different perspective. So, and I appreciate that, you know, we are a religion of always learning and realizing that language that was written then has different meaning than it might have now. And I know there are those who there are religious groups who believe the Bible is to be read exactly in the words that are simple and plain, and no more is to be read into it or thought about it. It is exactly those words with the meanings that we ascribe to them. And that to me is, you know, I don't read the Constitution that way either.
Okay. I was getting ready to say, the Constitution, some people take it just as they see it.
The part that they agree with.
Exactly.
Right. So, you know, we don't have militias. It's illegal to form your own militia in this country. But it talks about needing a gun for militia, right? We don't need to go there.
Yeah.
You have to remember it was different times when
exactly.
the Constitution was written, and that's why it's not appropriate to read it literally anymore.
I agree with you. That's why I actually like reading different scholars' take on it over different generations, because you see the evolution.
Yeah.
So, well, ladies, I hope this was meaningful to you. I will be in sunny Florida next Friday, enjoying some warmer weather.
Well, my dear sister at the beginning of class texted me that, good morning, going to be in the upper 80s today. So naturally, I went to the pool this morning. The water was pretty warm. I'm like, since I was about to start, wonderful, just starting Hebrew class, enjoy the weather. Love you.
Well, so we had a winter storm here yesterday, a wintry mix that because it was a wintry mix, we did not get the 6 inches of snow they said were possible. We only got a couple inches, but there's ice involved. There was pelting ice yesterday afternoon when I was driving. It's about 17 degrees. but it's going to go up to 40 tomorrow and 47 the next day. So we're going to have a lot of melting. So that's all fine.
And
Yeah.
we're
I
having
could use,
no measurable snow at all in this part of New Jersey and New York.
I know, it was in the 50s there yesterday, wasn't it?
It was supposed to be 60 today and then dropping to 27 tonight.
Yeah, no, I'm ready for, 75, 80, walking outside without a coat and putting on sunscreen. I can handle a couple of days of that.
Yeah.
Well, enjoy.
Yes. Enjoy. Rachel, do you know where, is it Flossmoor?
Flossmoor?
Yeah.
Yes. Not too close to me, Flossmoor, but yes, it's
Yeah.
south
That's
of the
where-
city.
That's where Aunt Marie lives.
Okay, it's not that far.
Like
When you come,
how far is it from the convention?
that's what I'm just gonna say, when you come for a convention,
At least a good
maybe
hour.
40 minutes because of traffic. There's a lot of traffic to get. It's far, I might be wrong. Maybe a half hour. I'm not positive. It kind of depends, but it's not real far from where you're gonna be.
Okay.
It's, she could come and meet you for a cup of coffee or, breakfast or something. I don't know, depending.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, wonderful. All right.
Okay.
Shabbat
Well,
shalom, everyone. Thank you,
Yeah,
Rachel.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat
Thanks
shalom.
for coming. Yeah.
Rachel, what's your street address? I want to send you something about Highland Park.
Oh, sure. You want me to put it in the chat real quick, or you want me to just email it to you?
You
Yeah,
wanna,
that would be fine.
did you stop recording?
Not yet. Let's stop.